Ladies and gentlemen, we are officially on the eve of the 2023-24 season. And with that, I wanted to go over the Toronto Maple Leafs, a 2023-24 preview for this team that has made headlines this summer. Obviously, the big one being that our boy wonder GM Kyle Dubas, he was canned. Brad Treliving is now the GM of this team, and whether you love him or you hate him, we're stuck with him. What are we gonna do? But in free agency and in the draft, I don't think Brad Treliving did a bad job. He brought us Easton Cohen, he brought us Matthew Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, John Klingberg. He's made some moves that, on paper, make this team better. And throughout training camp, we've had all of these stories about where's Matthew Knies gonna play? Is Nylander playing center? Does Fraser Minten actually have a shot at making this roster? We do officially have the starting lineup, the opening night lineup at least, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But before I get into that, let's get into a little bit of news regarding who was sent down and who was cut. In the Leafs' most recent wave of cuts or send downs to the Toronto Marlies, there are a couple players who do stick out to me that do actually have NHL upside. Those ones being Nick Abruzzese, who did play a couple of games with the Leafs last year. I thought he looked good. Then there's Pontus Holmberg, who also played for the Leafs last year, and in a lot of projections, people had him actually making the lineup, but obviously that doesn't happen. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing, because we can still just bring him up from the Marlies if need be. And of course, the big one, the big headline of this entire AHL send down is Nick Robertson, who continues to disappoint. I think that this year that there's absolutely no excuse for Robertson. I know that he's dealt with injuries. He had the back injury. He had all these things that have held him back. He was one of those weird sophomore COVID year players. But Robertson has had every opportunity to make the Leafs. He made them out of camp last year, and this year he just can't seem to find a spot. And now we're at a point where there are players who have been drafted after Nick Robertson who are making the Leafs before he is. I'm not entirely sure what the plan is with Nick Robertson. We know that he can be a great player, but he can't seem to stay healthy. He just can't seem to find a solid spot in the lineup like a David Kampf or a Calle Jarnkrok can. So just getting this out of the way for the rest of the video, my prediction with Robertson, I think he's going to be traded. I think Nick Robertson will not be with the Leafs by the end of this season. And with that out of the way, let's look at the lineup. Let's look at the official lineup for the Toronto Maple Leafs heading into their matchup versus Montreal. Now, one thing I should point out that I think is kind of a given is that the opening night lineup is usually not what it is by the end of the season. There's trades that are made, there are players that are sent down. There's one line in particular that, as much as I like it, I don't know if it's going to stay together for much longer than a couple of weeks. I think that the Leafs have a very versatile top nine. When you're looking at the guys from Matthews to Fraser Minten to Calle Jarnkrok to Ty Domi, all of these guys can slot anywhere in your top six. There's that versatility there. And with continuing to play with each other, guys like Matthews, Marner, Tavares, there's that sense of familiarity that is just absolutely great. It's a very positive thing for a forward group. And that versatility shows. There's a lot of contrast going throughout the lineups of different player archetypes meshing in with one another, such as with the first line of Tyler Bertuzzi, Austin Matthews, and Mitch Marner. We know that Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, they have incredible chemistry together. And then you have Tyler Bertuzzi, who could score, who could punch you in the face, and he'll get into the corners, kind of like a Zach Hyman, or I would even say a even better version of Michael Bunting for what he brought to the Leafs. Obviously, Michael Bunting is gone. He's in Carolina now, but I don't think that Tyler Bertuzzi is necessarily a downgrade. He could end up being an upgrade over Bunting. Moving into the second line now, it's kind of a similar format to the first, where you have Max Domi, John Tavares, and William Nylander. Tavares and Nylander, very familiar with each other. They played together a long time. And Max Domi brings the same thing that I would say Tyler Bertuzzi does, where he's able to score. He showed in Dallas that there is an elite side to him, that he can, at points, be the guy to rely on. Moving into the third line, which is the one that is making headlines, it is Matthew Knies, Fraser Minten. Fraser Minten. Who expected that Fraser Minten was going to be anchoring the third line? And then Calle Jarnkrok, who doesn't get the headline, but we love Calle too. Even Sheldon Keefe was talking about just what a surprise that was, that there was no projection where they had him making the lineup. And that's not because he's a bad player, it's just because Nobody expected him to be ready. Nobody expected him to show the upside and the elite traits that he did in the preseason. Fraser Minten is a hell of a player. And having Matthew Knies, who is also a hell of a player together, oh my goodness. Do I think Fraser Minten and Matthew Knies are going to have this incredible connection and light up the league by storm? Well, it's possible that they have a great connection, but expecting Fraser Minten to come out and be absolutely like world scorching it is a crazy thing. If I'm going to give my honest prediction, my totally unbiased prediction, I don't think that this line is going to stay together. I think at some point Minten is going to get sent down. I think at some point Knies might move up and down the lineup, but we'll see what ends up happening with this line. Regardless, I think it's great. And then the fourth line, the aforementioned Noah Gregor, who actually just signed a one-year NHL deal with the Leafs. David Kampf, who's been our fourth line center for a couple seasons now. And the ever-popular Ryan Reeves. Now, I was very critical of the Ryan Reeves signing when it first came out, but it's starting to grow on me a bit, and especially with the fact that if Ryan Reeves, just for whatever reason, does not work, we can just bury him in the minors. Now, this forward group as a whole, it's good. It's going to score goals. It's going to be great. It's going to be very versatile, like I said. I don't think that there's anything that you could tell me that this is not a top 5 to top 10 forward group in the NHL. Now moving into the defense, where there were a couple changes, but outside for maybe taking out Justin Holl and putting in Jonathan Klingberg, there's not much of a change from the lineup that we've seen in the playoffs. We still have Riley with Brody. McCabe and Klingberg is now the new second pairing, which I think could work really well. You have John Klingberg, who is known as just a straight offensive defenseman who can score goals, who can put up points, he can be a power play quarterback, similar to the role of Morgan Riley. And then you have Jake McCabe, who can play this defensive role. It's kind of a yin-yang thing that I think could work out really well. And then finally, the third pair is listed as Mark Giordano and Timothy Liljegren. You have the young Timothy Liljegren, who's still developing, and then you have Mark Giordano, who's the old veteran. Once again, it's just a great mix. And then finally, the goaltending, Ilya Samsonov's going to be the starter, and then you have Joseph Woll backing it up. We know how good Samsonov can be. We also know how good Joseph Woll can be. He's going to continue developing. I do believe that at some point in the future, I do think that Joseph Woll is going to end up being the starter of this team. I do believe that there is a future where Joseph Woll is the number one in the Leafs. The Athletic has the Toronto Maple Leafs finishing with 105 points, a 90% chance at making the playoffs, and a 10% chance of winning the cup. And honestly, I think that that's pretty on par. I don't think it's crazy to say that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to finish with 105 to 110, hell, even maybe 115. This team is going to contend for at least first in their division, if not first in possibly the NHL. That's how good this team can be. Now, am I saying that that's set in stone that they're going to be first? No. Do I think that there are teams that are better than the Leafs? Hell yes. Colorado, Vegas, Carolina, who looks like an absolute juggernaut. But the fact of the matter is, the Leafs are going to be expected to be good. The Leafs are going to be expected to be contending. They're going to be expected to be near the top of these standings. Just like they're going to be expected to be an offensive juggernaut. There is a world, I briefly touched upon it when talking about the third line, but there is a world where Matthew Knies, Fraser Minten, John Klingberg, they're all productive, and the Leafs are going to be tough to stop. Mixed in with the fact that we have Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander. If we get production out of the secondary guys, Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, this team could be really hard to stop. They could be an absolute wagon this year. Where it gets a little shaky for me is the defense. I'm not sure if, let's say, John Klingberg or Morgan Riley go down, how that's going to hold up. And then with that projection of them being this great team, it's no secret that the Atlantic is going to be tough. You still have Florida, you still have Tampa Bay. Boston is never going to be a pushover. They're going to be playing teams in the East for a majority of the year. The East is, to me, miles better than the West. There is a world where the Leafs have 105 to 107 points, 110 points, and they're second, third in their division just because of how good the Eastern Conference is, just because of how good the Atlantic is on its own. But all that aside, the regular season, we know that as Leaf fans, that hasn't meant much to us. The Leafs have been very good over the course of the last 6-7 years in the regular season. We've set records for points in the regular season. Every year, it's come down to what is this team going to do in the playoffs? How are they going to perform against the top competition on the league's biggest stage? That is a question that's going to be answered in months from now. That's not something that we can focus on. That's not something that we can project. The fact of the matter is, last year, they made some improvements. They beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6. They made it to the second round for the first time since 2004. This year, time to build on from it. Time to build from there. You finally experience what it's like to win something of significance. It's time to build up from there and build forward from there. How they do it, I'm not entirely sure. If they do it, equally not entirely sure. But let's sit back and watch how this season unfolds. I'm ready to be heard again. I'm wearing the blue. I'm ready to be heard again. Go Leafs go. Subscribe to the channel. Stay buzzing. And I'll see y'all next time.